Hey guys, this is the Octopus Hermit, emerging from my solitude to talk about the things I viewed. This is my list of top 5 favorite manga series. Now, I'm not going to say too much about each series because I want to avoid as many major spoilers as possible, because these are series that are worth checking out on your own and fully experiencing for yourself. So at number 5 we have Shin Angyo Onchi, aka Blade of the Phantom Master. And this story takes place in a fantasy world inspired by feudal Korea. And when the story starts off, we find out that there was this country called Jushin that had been destroyed after the king was killed, and it broke off into different kingdoms. And the main character is a man named Munsu, who worked as an Angyo Onchi, which is a government agent that travels in disguise and takes care of corrupt government officials. And we find out that he's on a journey to take revenge against the man that killed the king of Jushin, which was Munsu's best friend. The main character is really interesting. He's like a mix between Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop and Gus from Berserk. What I like about him is that he relies on being clever in fights instead of just being more powerful than his opponent. He's not above using tricks to win, and it's really enjoyable to watch. The story, the characters, the artwork, everything about this series is solid, and it's definitely worth checking out. At number 4, we have Yu Yu Hakusho. This is a classic series. This is about a boy named Yusuke Urameshi who's a delinquent, and he saves a kid from getting hit by a car, but he is in turn hit by a car and he becomes a ghost. And he meets a girl named Botan, who is the Grim Reaper, and she says that there's a chance for him to be brought back to life, but he has to undergo a trial. And so he gets brought back to life pretty early on in the series, and since he was dead, he's now more like spiritually aware. He can see things that normal people can't, and he ends up working for the spirit world as a spirit detective, and he goes on different cases. He learns how to use spirit energy and gets into a lot of different fights. There's a diverse group of allies that join him. This series has one of the best casts of characters, and the villains are enjoyably twisted. The author is really proficient at writing villains. This series can be pretty dark, but what keeps it from being too dark is that the characters, they have a good amount of fun, they have a good attitude. Now this would be probably higher on my list, but I find that it's not as enjoyable as the anime series. But this is definitely worth checking out if you're a fan. There are some things that are different in the manga. Like, he's a ghost for a little longer. There's some extra stories with that. It's cool to see Yusuke deal with different problems. It's some good characterization to get out early on. And the ending is different. There's some extra stories, although it is more abrupt, and they cut out some fights, but it's still a great series. Check it out. At number 3, we have Berserk. This is a dark fantasy series. The protagonist is a man named Guts, whose life is just filled with tragedy, but this has in turn made him into a hardened warrior. He's one of the most badass protagonists in all of manga. He fights with this gigantic sword, and he gets into a lot of fights with these nightmarish creatures known as apostles. And his goal is to take revenge against a man named Griffith. I'm not going to spoil any more than that, but when you find out what Guts has been through, your jaw will be on the floor. This is a horrific series, but it is just so good. This series contains a lot of explicit content, but if you can stomach that, this is a must-read. The artwork is just among the greatest I've ever seen. The author goes on hiatus a lot, and looking at the quality of his artwork is understandable because drawing that well must take a lot out of you. At number 2, we have Hunter x Hunter. This series has the same author as Yu Yu Hakusho. In the world of Hunter x Hunter, a hunter is somebody who passes a hunter exam and receives a hunter license, and this gives them more freedom in the world to do things. The main character of this series is a boy named Gon Freaks, who decides to become a hunter so he can find his father, who is one of the best hunters in the world. And he makes friends, and they're all interesting characters, and the villains are interesting as well. The villains are just as twisted as the villains in the author's previous work. There's a lot of creative storytelling in this series. Each arc feels like distinct from the next, and the author is really clever with how he tells stories. One of my only problems with this series is that the artwork can be unrefined at times, like very sketchy, very rough drafty. But aside from that, everything about this series is really strong. The storytelling and characters are top-notch. You really get a feel for who these characters are. Like, the way they're written is great. The way they think through situations is really enjoyable. It makes them feel like there's substance to them. Great series, I recommend it highly. And my number 1 favorite manga series is One Piece. This series is just oozing with imagination. The art style is unique, and it's really cartoony, and it really suits the fantasy world that the story is in. The protagonist of this series is a boy named Monkey D. Luffy. When he's little, he would look up to this pirate that he knew named Red-Haired Shanks, and Red-Haired Shanks had a straw hat, and he gave the hat to Luffy and told him, "Return this hat to me when you become a great pirate." And so Luffy becomes a pirate. He sets off, he gathers crew members, he gets into fights with both the world government and enemy pirate crews, and Luffy wants to travel the world and reach the island of Raftel, where the legendary treasure One Piece is, and whoever finds One Piece will be considered the Pirate King, and that is Luffy's greatest ambition. This series easily has the best world I've ever seen in any manga series. The way the author, Eiichiro Oda, draws this series, he infuses just so much charm into the way he draws it. He puts in tons of details. He makes this world feel lived in. There's a lot of variety with this series. Each character is distinct. They all have their own quirks, and they're all likable in their own ways. This is a really long series. Each arc feels like it could be its own series. Everything is unique from arc to arc. However, there are things that tie in with each arc that flow from one to the next. Something that seems insignificant will come back hundreds of chapters later, and that's just a really cool thing about this series. There are some things that are expected, but some things that truly catch you by surprise. And that's just part of the enjoyability of this series. In the world of One Piece, there are special fruits known as devil fruits, and when you eat one, you will gain some sort of power from it, but you will lose the ability to swim. And Luffy has eaten the Gomu Gomu no Mi, which gives him the power of rubber. It turns his body into rubber. This is a pretty light-hearted series for the most part, although it does become dark at times, which is enjoyable to see. It can be emotionally intense. The author of this series is great at manipulating the emotions. He can make you laugh at one page and make you cry on another. There's a good blend of comedy and suspense in this series. The pure creativity of this series is unrivaled. It's one of the most creative battle manga there is. This series presents a grand adventure, and if you enjoy manga in any capacity, this is a must-read. So those are my top 5 favorite manga series. Look forward to more lists in the future. Feel free to like my video, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, whatever floats your boat. Thank you for watching, and I'll see ya.